Attention! 3 signs that the universe is talking to you. Gregg Braden. A subtle, almost imperceptible feeling. Not a sound, not an image, but a calling. You can't explain where it comes from. It's not a voice you hear with your ears. It's more like an inner breath, an invisible touch on your attention. It can happen when you're alone in the car, staring at traffic, or during a distracted walk through your neighborhood. Sometimes it happens in the middle of a conversation and no one notices that, inside, something in you has stopped to listen. This instant, so delicate, is as if life itself were holding its breath. Gregg Braden says we live inside a unified field, a kind of living, intelligent web that responds to our emotions, our gestures, our way of being in the world. This isn't just a metaphor, it's physics and spirituality woven together. This web, invisible to the eyes, reacts like an organism that recognizes us, that follows us, and that returns signals to us. And just like in a conversation, this communication doesn't happen only when you speak or ask for something. Often it happens in silence, in the details, in the small gestures of the universe that blend into everyday life. But Joe Dispenza reminds us that our brain doesn't receive these signals in raw form. It filters everything through the lens of our memories, past experiences, and the beliefs we repeat without even realizing it. And often this filter is saturated with doubt, fear, and mistrust. That's why so many messages are lost, not because the universe doesn't speak, but because we're not tuned in to hear it. Here's an analogy I like to use. Imagine your mind and heart as an old radio, the kind you have to turn a dial to find the right station. When you're a bit off frequency, the sound is full of static, noise, and interference. But when you hit the exact point, the music comes through clearly, effortlessly, and you realize it was always there. The difference wasn't the music starting to play, it was you being able to receive it. That's exactly how it is with the signs from the universe. They don't just appear suddenly, they've always been there. What changes is your tuning. The thing is, almost no one teaches us how to tune in. We grow up believing that the external world is all that matters, that answers come from books, advice, or what we can see and touch. But what if what you call coincidence is actually a dialogue? What if what you've always interpreted as chance is, in reality, an intentional sequence of subtle nudges trying to guide you toward a path? And what if your life right now is full of small clues, but you simply haven't learned to recognize them? Today, I want you to join me on a journey of observation, recognition, and translation of these signs. Not with hurry, not with anxiety, but with presence. Together, let's open our senses to notice how the universe speaks, how it repeats patterns, creates improbable encounters, and silences everything around you so that you can notice something essential. By the end, I don't just want you to be able to identify these 3 signs, but to understand how they intertwine with the way you think, feel, and move in the world. Because maybe what you've been calling intuition is much more than a hunch. Maybe it's the universe itself patiently repeating, "I'm here, and I'm speaking to you." There are moments when life seems to insist on the same detail. A number appearing in different places, a word that repeats in conversations with people who don't even know each other, a specific object showing up in improbable places. At first glance, this might seem like nothing more than coincidence, but when the repetition becomes so persistent that it stirs something inside you, it's as if something greater is trying to make itself heard. Gregg Braden describes these patterns as markers within the unified field, reference points indicating that you're touching a specific frequency of change or decision. It's as if the universe, sensing your scattered attention, decides to amplify the sound of a detail until it can no longer be ignored. This isn't superstition, it's vibrational coherence. A pattern only repeats because your energy, consciously or unconsciously, is in resonance with it. But there's a subtle risk here. Many people, upon noticing a repetition, rush to interpret it as a ready-made prophecy. This creates a dangerous shortcut where the symbolism is twisted to serve the desires and anxieties of the moment. The true purpose of these signs isn't to tell you what will happen, but to open space for you to investigate why it's being shown. A repeated symbol isn't a complete map, it's just an arrow pointing to something important along the way. There's also the opposite risk, ignoring the repetition because it seems trivial. The human brain is a master at filtering out what doesn't seem relevant for immediate survival, and that includes subtle signs. When we treat symbolic repetition as a passing curiosity, its energy dissipates. It's like turning off a flashlight in the middle of a dark trail. Imagine for a moment that your life is a grand novel, and the author, the universe itself, is using a literary device called a recurring motif. In film and literature, when a detail is repeated several times, it's because it has meaning for the plot. To ignore it is like flipping through pages without realizing the thread of the story was right there all along. The act of recording these signs, even without immediately understanding them, is an exercise in presence. Not to create obsession, but so that over time you can distinguish the echo of your own expectations from a real sign. When a symbol keeps appearing even when you're not consciously thinking about it, it's a sign its origin is deeper than the surface of the mind. Sometimes symbolic repetition prepares the ground for something that hasn't happened yet. Other times, it confirms that you're already on the right path, even when logic says otherwise. Either way, it's always an invitation to look deeper, to question what you're vibrating, and to realize that in the midst of life's apparent chaos, there is a secret language being spoken. There are encounters that seem to be born from an invisible agreement between forces we cannot control. You are in the right place at the right time, and something happens that rearranges not only external events, but also your own inner state. It's as if for a few seconds, the world bends to create a bridge between your life and an answer you didn't even know you were seeking. The difference between coincidence and synchronicity lies in the impact it has on you. Coincidences skim the surface of your attention and soon dissipate. Synchronicities, on the other hand, pierce through that surface and stir the deeper layers of your perception. They don't just happen, they change the way you interpret the present moment. Gregg Braden describes these experiences as micro-portals in the fabric of reality, moments when the human mind and the unified field come into perfect harmony. It's not magic in the usual sense of the word, but the result of multiple unseen factors converging in the same point. It's as if all the vectors of your life, thoughts, emotions, past decisions, crossed in one precise instant to create an event that could never have been planned in a linear way. But there's one detail most people overlook. True synchronicities require no effort to happen. When someone tries to hunt them down as proof that the universe is working, they unintentionally create a vibrational tension that distorts perception itself. The beauty of synchronicity lies in its naturalness. It happens while you are living, not while you are straining to find it. Imagine walking along a forest trail and suddenly finding a rare flower exactly where a beam of sunlight, slipping between the trees, lights up its petals. That flower didn't appear to prove anything, it was already there. And the encounter was the result of multiple paths crossing: yours, the sun's, the plant's blooming season, and the time of year. A synchronicity is like that. The overlapping of lines that connect without you forcing the fit. Some people, when they go through an intense synchronicity, feel a slight shiver, a warmth in the chest, or a sudden clarity. It's as if the body itself confirms, this matters. This reaction is not just emotional, it's also physiological. The nervous system responds to such experiences with specific patterns, releasing neurotransmitters that reinforce the feeling of meaning. When recognized, a synchronicity doesn't just point the way. It awakens a more aligned, more attentive state, one that is more open to other signs. It's as if the universe says, now that you've noticed, we can keep the conversation going. There are moments when the universe doesn't speak through images, numbers, or improbable encounters. It speaks through absence, a silence so dense that it feels like it suspends the air around you. This kind of stillness is not to be confused with lack of movement. It is the presence of something that doesn't need to express itself in sound to be felt. You go about your routine, distracted by thoughts or tasks, and suddenly, it's as if the internal noise stops. Anxiety eases, the body relaxes, and for a few moments, everything feels aligned, even if nothing external has changed. This silence is one of the most subtle, yet most transformative signs. It is not the absence of action from the universe, but the confirmation that something is being built entirely beyond the reach of your urgency. Gregg Braden explains that states of heart coherence, when mind and heart are in vibrational harmony, create a kind of clear channel for subtle information to flow. And often the purest form of response does not come as words or images, but as this quiet, welcoming field. Silence as a sign does not happen by chance. It arises when there's a perceptible shift in your energy. Sometimes it is sparked by an involuntary moment of contemplation, looking out the window and unknowingly stopping your thoughts for a few seconds. Other times it emerges in the middle of chaos, as if a bubble of calm had formed around you. It is in this inner space that many answers arrive, not as ready-made ideas, but as sensations that later turn into clarity. However, it is common for this silence to be misinterpreted as nothing happening. The human mind has been trained to look for visible, concrete, and measurable signs, which makes it underestimate the power of a moment of stillness. Yet it is in this apparent emptiness that your frequency stabilizes, allowing the unified field to arrange connections and pathways that are not yet visible on the physical plane. Think of the moment before sunrise. Darkness seems complete, but there is something in the air, a silent expectation. A few minutes later, the horizon begins to glow. The silence we speak of is like that moment, the prelude to something about to be revealed. You cannot force the sun to rise before its time. The role of this silence is to prepare you to receive what is coming. The practice of coherent breathing can enhance your ability to recognize and extend this state. Breathing in and out rhythmically, with your attention on your heart, for just 3 minutes, creates an inner space similar to the one the universe uses to speak without words. It's not a technique to provoke immediate answers, but to tune your body and mind to the silent language that often carries more meaning than any verbal explanation. One of the greatest barriers to perceiving the messages of the universe is not the lack of signs, but the rigidity with which we expect them to appear. So often, we create such a specific mental image of what we want to see, hear, or feel that anything that does not match that expectation exactly is dismissed as irrelevant. The problem is that the universe rarely speaks in the language of our prediction. It speaks in the language of necessity, of learning, of expansion, even when it is not what we would like to hear. It's like someone standing by the door waiting for a letter while the message has already arrived through a phone call, a stranger's glance, or even a disruption in their schedule that altered their route for the day. Neville Goddard used to say that our imagination shapes reality, but we also restrict its flow when we predetermine the exact form the result must take. By fixating on the how instead of the why or the for what, perception narrows and valuable signs pass unnoticed. This insistence on the expected format is born, in part, from the fear of making a wrong turn. The human mind seeks security in the predictable, and when it comes to something as intangible as messages from the universe, it's natural to want clear references. However, the field of possibilities where these messages form is much wider than any reference we can create, and is precisely this breadth that allows life to surprise us with answers we would never have formulated on our own. Gregg Braden and Joe Dispenza agree that on the quantum level, information arrives in energetic packets that can be translated in multiple ways, depending on our openness to interpret them. This openness is not passivity, it is presence. It is being awake enough to realize that, many times, the strange coincidence or the change of plans are not accidents, but parts of a storyline that will only make sense later. We must recognize that rigid expectation is, in practice, a filter. And every filter lets through only what fits it, blocking the rest. When we release the need to control the form, we make space for life to bring us creative answers. Synchronicity, as Carl Jung described, happens precisely because we are not forcing a mechanical match. It emerges when meaning appears in an unexpected, yet deeply coherent way. Imagine searching for a specific book on a shelf, and by pulling out the wrong one, finding exactly the answer you needed, but in a completely different context. That is the kind of freedom the universe has to communicate when we do not imprison it in the format we expect. By recognizing this, we stop being impatient gatekeepers at the door and become attentive travelers on the road, ready to receive the message at the exact point where it appears, no matter the scenery. There are moments when we expect signs to be clear, obvious, almost loud. Yet the universe, with its ancient patience, sometimes chooses to manifest through a deep silence, a silence that is not empty, but full of presence. It is the space between notes that gives meaning to music, and it is in that space that life often invites us to listen to what cannot be spoken in words. Silence in this context is not the absence of communication, but the subtlest way of saying, observe, stay. Something is taking shape. When nothing seems to be happening, it's common to feel anxious, as if we were standing in the dark without a map. But as Joe Dispenza explains, it is precisely in the space of not knowing that quantum transformation is prepared. It is as if reality were being rearranged, and the only possible action is to remain receptive even without understanding the process. Many answers arrive not as ready-made sentences, but as internal shifts, a weight suddenly lifting, a clarity upon waking, an unexpected peace in the middle of chaos. Silence can be a fertile ground where our perception matures, allowing us to see what once went unnoticed. In this quiet ripening, we begin to distinguish between mental noise and the authentic voice of intuition. Gregg Braden speaks of the unified field as a living web that connects everything and everyone. In this field, there is no true vacuum, only the pause before the next wave. When we hear nothing, it does not mean that nothing is happening. It means the next movement is still being shaped in the depths of that field. It is as if standing before a still lake. The surface may seem motionless, but beneath it, life is pulsing, invisible to the eyes. The challenge is to resist the urge to fill the silence with forced answers. The restless mind tries to interpret, to invent signs where none exist, or to accelerate a process that has its own rhythm. But if we can remain in this space without giving in to haste, something changes. Silence becomes an ally rather than an enemy. It stops being an uncomfortable void and becomes a place of gestation where new possibilities are being nurtured. Perhaps that's why some of life's most transformative moments happen when we do the least, when we let go, not out of exhaustion, but out of trust. It is in that instant that, without warning, the sign arrives not only as an answer, but as the certainty that we were being guided all along, even in the apparent silence. There are moments where events seem simply curious, an unexpected meeting, a phrase overheard by chance, a song starting to play just as you were thinking of something. The logical mind tends to label them as coincidences, and indeed many are just random intersections of events. But in other cases, there is such precise synchronicity that we feel, almost instinctively, that there is something greater behind it. The difference between a coincidence and a sign is not just in the event itself, but in the inner resonance it awakens. Coincidences are neutral. Signs move you. They awaken a recognition that doesn't come from thought, but from a deeper place. Neville Goddard said that the external reality is only a reflection of our inner state. When certain events seem to align in an almost impossible way, they may not be mere accidents, but mirrors, showing where we are vibrating. Gregg Braden explains that in the web of connections that unites all things, nothing is truly separate. In this context, signs are not sent from out there to in here. They emerge from the intertwining of your consciousness with the universe. It is as if your intentions, emotions, and thoughts were small stones thrown onto the surface of a lake, creating ripples that sooner or later return to you. Coincidences, by contrast, do not carry that emotional or symbolic weight. They don't stir questions or open new paths. A true sign, even a small one, has the ability to alter your course, or at least make you pause and reflect. That's why when you encounter a genuine sign, the sensation is almost physical. A shiver, a lump in the throat, a sudden peace in the middle of chaos. The danger lies in searching for signs everywhere, forcing interpretations. This can lead to illusions and to losing the real meaning of what manifests. A genuine sign does not need to be deciphered with effort. It asserts itself with clarity. It is as if it were saying, without words, you know what this means. And somehow you do, even if you can't explain it rationally. Between chance and calling, the line is thin, but when the heart reacts before the mind, when the experience provokes an inner silence full of meaning, perhaps we are not merely facing a coincidence. Perhaps it is the universe whispering, and we are, at last, ready to listen. Before we can recognize the sign coming from the outer world, we must first learn to identify those that quietly arise within us. They don't always take the form of clear thoughts. Often, they are diffuse sensations, subtle shifts in inner energy, or gut feelings that seem to have no origin. The body isn't a tireless messenger. A restlessness in the chest, a heaviness in the stomach, a sudden lightness with no apparent reason. All of these can be the subtle language of our inner system, which perceives far more than the conscious mind. Joe Dispenza explains that when we change our emotional state, we also change the way our brain filters reality. This means that before we even notice a sign out there, something inside us has already begun to shift. When ignored, these internal signs tend to intensify. First, a mild discomfort, then persistent fatigue, a loss of interest in things that once brought joy. It's as if life, through our own body and emotions, were trying to warn us, you are not on the path aligned with your essence. The problem is we are so accustomed to living in noise, both external and mental, that we stop hearing the whisper. Recognizing these signs does not require complex techniques, but rather presence, moments of pause, conscious breathing, or simply paying attention to our physical and emotional reactions to situations. Does the heart speed up or slow down? Does the body contract or expand? Is there enthusiasm or exhaustion? These simple responses hold more truth than any elaborate reasoning. The danger lies in dismissing these perceptions for being too small. But just as a river begins with a trickle, internal signs are the start of a greater movement. They precede external synchronicities. When you acknowledge them, you realize that the universe doesn't speak only through extraordinary events, but also through your own biology, which after all is part of the same fabric that forms everything. An internal sign is like a first wave of the hand. If we ignore it, it returns stronger, sometimes transformed into external circumstances that force us to stop. What could have been a subtle adjustment then becomes an abrupt change. Listening early is always less painful. If internal signs are like intimate whispers, external signs are like echoes, returning in visible form, crossing our everyday path. They can appear in seemingly casual conversations, in phrases repeated by different sources, in images, numbers, or unexpected encounters. These are moments when something aligns so precisely that the word coincidence feels insufficient. Braden compares these events to patterns forming in the sand under the wind's touch. At first glance, everything seems random, but upon closer observation, one can see a hidden harmony guiding each grain. External signs are the same. Life organizes circumstances which, when noticed, point toward subtle directions. The challenge lies in distinguishing these signs from mere noise. Not every unusual event holds deep meaning, and not every recurring occurrence is a message. The difference is in the resonance. When an external sign is genuine, it stirs something inside us, a silent recognition, an immediate knowing, this is meant for me. Often these signs arrive in sequence. It's as if the universe sends growing reminders to confirm we're on the right track or to alert us that a change is needed. A song that keeps appearing, an improbable meeting at just the right moment, or even repeated obstacles indicating we're insisting on a misaligned route. Neville Goddard said the outer world is a mirror of the inner world. When we shift our vibration, we start noticing different signs because we attract experiences that match our inner state. This means the focus should not only be on what appears, but also on how we feel when it happens. When noticing these signs, it's important not to rush into immediate logic. Many external messages reveal themselves over time, like puzzle pieces that only make sense when assembled. Sometimes, the event is the seed, and the understanding is the tree that will grow months or years later. These external signs are not guarantees of fate, but invitations to adjust our course. The more attuned we are to our essence, the clearer they become, and the quicker we recognize they are not mere coincidences, but manifestations of a constant dialogue between us and the universe. Every sign, whether internal or external, speaks through a universal language, the symbol. The universe rarely communicates directly, as if writing explicit instructions. Instead, it turns to images, metaphors, patterns, and archetypes that speak directly to the unconscious. This is why we often don't understand the message right away, but we feel its impact. Braden often says that the language of the universe is the same that governs dreams. In it, a number can represent more than a quantity. A color can evoke an emotion. An animal can symbolize a strength or a challenge we need to integrate. This symbolic form of communication is not random. It's shaped by our own history, culture, and life experiences. Dispenza adds that when our mind is open and receptive, the brain begins to link the symbol with the emotion felt at the moment it appears. This way, that symbol gains a unique personal meaning, becoming an emotional marker that repeats itself until the lesson or impulse is understood. The symbol is also timeless. It may arise when you are ready to hear it, even if its origin goes back years. For example, a certain image or word may reappear after a long time, now carrying new meaning, as if it had been waiting for the maturity needed to be deciphered. Interpreting this language requires not only observation, but sensitivity. The same sign can have different meanings for different people because the universe adapts to each person's emotional vocabulary. That's why the first step is to notice what that symbol stirs inside you: calm, warning, inspiration, nostalgia, or discomfort. Over time, this perception sharpens. Small events begin to be read as fragments of an ongoing dialogue. A bird landing in front of you the moment you think about giving up might mean nothing to someone who sees it as just another animal, but could be profoundly transformative for someone who recognizes it as a messenger of courage or freedom. The universe speaks in the language of the soul, and this language cannot be captured in fixed dictionaries. It is alive, fluid, shaped by your own journey. When you learn to hear and understand these symbols, you begin to see that nothing is truly disconnected. Everything is part of a greater story, where each detail is a fragment of the whole. Signs never arrive too early nor too late. They appear exactly at the moment you are prepared to perceive them, even if, on the surface, everything seems confusing or out of order. This precision is not the result of chance, but of a deeper synchronicity between your inner state and the natural flow of life. Braden describes this phenomenon as a dance between human intention and universal intelligence. When your inner vibration, formed by thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, reaches a specific frequency, you align with experiences and messages that match it. That's when the sign appears. It is not just an alert or an invitation, it is also a silent confirmation that you are on the exact step of the ladder you needed to reach. Dispenza adds that the human brain is a constant radar in search of patterns. Often the sign was already present around you, but it only becomes visible when your mind expands to recognize it. It's as if life waits for the moment when your focus and emotional state allow that information to be integrated. The timing of signs also follows a principle of energy economy. Nothing happens before it's necessary because that would waste emotional and mental resources. A sign received too early could generate anxiety or confusion. Likewise, too late, it would lose the transformative power it would have had if it arrived at the right time. This temporal alignment is not always obvious while we are living the experience. Often we only recognize the perfection of this timing when we look back. That's when we understand that every encounter, every delay, every unexpected change was part of a meticulously orchestrated storyline leading us to the exact point where we needed to be. Understanding this synchronicity is also learning to trust. Life is neither against you nor indifferent. It is, silently, weaving the ideal conditions for each sign to fulfill its role. When this awareness matures, the anxiety over when begins to dissolve, giving way to a serene trust in the natural rhythm of things. Although at first glance, coincidence and synchronicity may seem the same, there is a profound difference between them. Coincidence is a fortuitous meeting of events, something that happens without apparent connection or meaning, like bumping into an acquaintance while walking down an unfamiliar street. Synchronicity, on the other hand, a concept explored by Carl Jung and widely discussed by thinkers such as Gregg Braden, is the meeting of events connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning. Coincidence is neutral, almost like the background noise of life. Synchronicity carries symbolic weight, a meaning that resonates with something inside you. It's as if the universe were answering an unspoken question or confirming an intuition you already felt. Joe Vitale describes this phenomenon as the universal mind responding to your vibration translated into tangible events along your path. Synchronicity often manifests when you're in a receptive state. It's not just about paying attention, but about being tuned to a clear intention and an open emotional state. It's like adjusting the frequency of a radio. When tuned correctly, the messages arrive clear and precise, and every event seems to fit perfectly into your life's moment. While coincidence is random and does not necessarily require reflection, synchronicity invites interpretation. It acts as a mirror, reflecting your inner state. It can be an overheard conversation that delivers the answer you needed, a book you stumble upon that addresses exactly what you are going through, or even a sequence of seemingly impossible events aligning to open a new path. The difference lies in the impact and meaning. A coincidence can be forgotten in minutes, but synchronicity lingers, provokes questions, and often shapes decisions. It's a silent reminder that reality is deeper and more interconnected than our linear perception tends to admit. When you recognize this distinction, you begin to notice that certain events are not just happening, they are engaging in a dialogue with you. And this dialogue, subtle and precise, is one of the most elegant ways the universe communicates. Intuition is often described as knowledge that arises without the need for logical reasoning. It is a feeling before thinking, an immediate perception that does not depend on obvious external facts. Researchers like Joe Dispenza explain that this sixth sense is deeply connected to the heart's electromagnetic field and the constant communication between body and mind. When interpreting signs, intuition works as an internal filter, separating what is mere noise from what truly has meaning for your moment in life. It's like the sensitive radar, capable of detecting subtle connections the rational mind might overlook. When an event triggers an intense or unexplainable sensation, it is intuition indicating that there is something there to be observed more closely. Gregg Braden emphasizes that intuition is a bridge between our conscious state and the field of information that surrounds us. In this field, all possibilities already exist, and intuition helps us identify which ones are most aligned with our journey. This is why it often manifests before logic has time to formulate a justification. An important aspect is that intuition does not impose itself with noisy urgency. On the contrary, it's gentle, silent, and thus easily drowned out by anxious thoughts or external distractions. It may arise as a quick mental image, a shiver, a sudden discomfort, or even a sense of familiarity in the face of something completely new. When aligned with conscious awareness, intuition becomes a powerful tool for interpreting the signs the universe sends. Instead of seeking answers solely through rational analysis, you also include what you feel to be true. And often this combination leads to decisions that are more aligned, fluid, and harmonious. In essence, intuition is not just a guide for interpreting the signs, it is part of the very dialogue the universe maintains with you. It is the inner channel through which the most subtle messages arrive, those that do not express themselves in words, but that can completely change the course of your story.